All right, we're in the presence of a quorum, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. And our chairman is absent. Did he say his birthday? I don't know. And there's a birthday and a grandchild, some shared birthday. Anyhow, he is absent for a special family event, so I am chairing in his stead. And he has initiated the Pledge of Allegiance, so we will get up and say the pledge, and then I will proceed. All right, I guess we're going to have to ask for introductions. First of all, sitting where our town manager usually sits is, you look vaguely familiar. Even I have been, I think you're a star of some sort in movies. Would you mind introducing yourself, sir?
Lord Vader.
And you, sitting in the place where our colleague Franny Osmond normally sits, would you care to introduce yourself? You have to use the mic, Mr. Squirrel.
I'm a Ms. Squirrel.
Ms. Squirrel, sorry.
I represent the wildlife of Acton tonight.
Very nice. All right. The first order of business on the agenda is the citizens' concerns. Any citizens who have concerns that are not going to be covered on our agenda are free to come up to the microphone and speak. Sir, no citizens' concerns. All right. Next is the chairman's update. Trick-or-treating in town is 6 to 8 p.m. tonight. Kids, you have one more hour to go out and grab some candy. I didn't see very many of you when I was driving here. I was driving very carefully. I didn't want to run over anybody. Early voting continues for another week. Let's see. Today, well, 5 p.m. you missed out if you wanted to vote today. But tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, voting will be at Town Hall from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And the last day for early voting will be Friday from 7 to 5 p.m. There will be a first aid and CPR AED, which is automated external defibrillator training session at the public safety facility on Thursday, November 10th, and Wednesday, November 16th from 5 to 9 p.m. The cost is $85, and to reserve a spot, get in touch with Tom Matthews, whose email address is tmatthews@acton-mass.gov. The town's proposed electrical aggregation plan will be undergoing the Public Utilities Commission hearing, that's the state agency, Monday, November 14th at 2 p.m. at 1 South Station on the 5th floor. Anybody wishing to comment may attend in person, or you may submit your comments up until 5 o'clock that day, and there's further information about the proposed plan on the town website under Acton Town News. The winter parking ban in town, which goes for 4 months, starts tomorrow, November 1st, and continues through April 1st, 2017. And finally, the Board of Selectmen will be meeting again tomorrow night, Tuesday, November 1st at 7 o'clock for the continued hearing on the Town of Concord's proposed water treatment facility at Nagog Pond. We will be convening at the high school auditorium, so don't come here because this is where you come to vote early. So, and with that, Mr. Vader, if you would like to fill in what the town manager was going to say, thank you.
Rebel forces have been very active on Naboo. Can't take it anymore, sorry. I can't read my notes either, so. I don't know how we did it, really. It's quite amazing. We've had now two meetings of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. First meeting was really just to get organized. The second meeting, which was last Wednesday, the committee took a tour of the three fire stations and saw kind of the state of their HVAC systems and other things. In 2 weeks from today, the committee will be taking a tour of the highway garage. So that process is underway. Also, we've been approached by the T, and we're looking into the situation of installing some solar on some of the parking areas of the MBTA. One on the on the Railroad Street lot, which they own, and they have also offered to put some solar arrays on our own parking lot. So I will be discussing this, I'm sure, at a later date when they have a little more definitive plans. Apparently, the T has gotten a grant to do this, and they also have talked about giving us the net metering credits for these installations. So there'll be more on that. One thing I did want to make the board aware of is, as you recall at the last meeting, we had a presentation from the company Obsolete that is looking at locating to Acton. They make these small pods for insulin injections. At this point, it looks like negotiations between the owner of 100 NAGOG and Obsolete have kind of stalled. I'm not really sure where they're going to proceed. It does look like the price that Obsolete is willing to pay is not something that the owner wants to accept. So it'll be more as that goes along. One of the things we're trying to determine is if in fact we can work out a deal looking at when we could bring this issue to a town meeting. So at this point, it's so up in the air, we're not really prepared to discuss it at this point, but just wanted to make the board aware that that situation may be changing and not necessarily changing for the good. And that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. And I assume it's almost 7:10. I will just read the continuance. At 7:10, we were going to have site plan special permit, use special permit number 9/1/2016-463, about 362 to 366 Central Street. That's actually Idlewild Farm. That meeting the hearing has been continued to November 7th at 7:10 p.m. So we won't be discussing that tonight. Next, I would suggest that we do consent agenda and then finish up the meeting with Selectmen's business. So consent agenda, if you want to pull any of these, just speak up. Number 5, request to dispose of obsolete material, Acton Memorial Library. Number 6, appointments for sealer weights and measures. Number 7, CPA application request for RHSO funding, Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Planning Department. I think there's also some mention of the administrative costs, but maybe that wasn't a request. Number 8, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Irina Buch-Galter, NAGOG Clubhouse, November 24, 2016. Number 9, Eagle Scout Court of Honor, Benjamin Flom and Ryan McDowell, Saturday, November 26, 2016. That is Ms. Osmond's charge. And number 10, transfer of development rights and restriction, Great Road. Number 11, committee appointment, Emily Ying, full member, Planning Board. Number 12, meeting minutes, September 12, 2016. And number 13, conservation restriction, Wright Hill. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve consent agenda items 5 through 13.
Second.
Katie moves, Ching Sung second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Abstaining, thank you. And now finally, Selectmen's business. Item number 2 is Acting Nursing Service Advisory Committee charge discussion and vote.
Who's do it? It was me.
Is this yours, Katie?
Yeah. So a couple meetings ago, back in September, we had the presentation from the Acton Nursing Services Task Force on their final report, and as part of that presentation, they had a recommendation to create a standing committee with the suggested name of the Acton Nursing Services Advisory Committee. So I put together a draft charge based on their recommendations for what the committee should work on and the makeup of the committee. I also ran this by the Acton Nursing Services Director, and she was supportive of how the charge is laid out. I don't know if there are any questions.
Are there any questions or comments about the proposed charge? Franny?
No.
Ms. Squirrel? You realize that you're looking at us, but they're looking at you, we see a squirrel.
No, the reason I made that noise was because I didn't see it in the packet. I don't know why. I was downloading everything, so I'm reading it right this second.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, it was in there, but.
Oh,
Go ahead.
My only
Ready?
comment is, does this really need to be 9 people?
That was the recommendation of the task force, was 9 people, 7 members and 2 associate members, and that's what they felt has worked well, so.
Okay. I mean, if that's what they feel works well, it's fine. I mean, I just,
And I did read it. I'm remembering now that I read it, and so it's fine.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have gotten questions, and it's not from FinCom, it's actually from some other people who, well, they're wondering about the need for sort of a standing advisory committee for basically what is now part of the operating budget. It's a department, it's part of a department, and I guess they're wondering why this, and, as opposed to some other operations. My question, I mean, that's one issue, but my question has to do with, okay, if we're going to have a committee that is focused on, I assume, improving the nursing services visibility and everything, I would really like, just because you're going to have to hear about it from FinCom otherwise, to have some component of their doing quarterly or semi-annual financial updates. And if they can't themselves get access to the data, they have to either enable the nursing service to pull that data together, or they need a consultant. But it's something that they could work, they'll have to work on with the town staff, or the nursing service people themselves who have access to confidential data will have to be able to do it. But I know that question is going to come up, and it's going to keep coming up, because it is true, and I think even Mr. Cadlick himself would say that now that the operation is in the operating budget, things are very camouflaged. It's much harder to discern what is actually going on with that, which is why I think he was one of the people who advocated for having stuff put into the separate enterprise fund, and he himself acknowledged that he was going back on that sort of trend. So that would be my suggestion, is to have a little more teeth, as opposed to being kind of a cheerleader committee.
So to the first point about why a committee for a town department, I mean, we have a lot of committees that support town departments. Just off the top of my head, Recreation Committee supports the Recreation Department. So I don't think that there's any, conflict or anything unusual about that there. And again, it's something that the Nursing Services Director has found particularly helpful, because they're a small staff, and so being able to do some of this ancillary work, she doesn't, and her staff don't have time to do it. So they've found it very helpful to have people with experience and interest and willingness to lend a hand and their expertise. And in terms of the financial issues, again, that was a long discussion that we had as a task force over a number of meetings, and unfortunately, that there are issues related to HIPAA and other things that make getting the financial data tricky. And while they have discussions, and they do meet with town staff in the finance department regularly to talk about the financial issues, they very much did not think it was it made sense to have that part of this committee's charge, because they really aren't able to get that information themselves. So while they do work on it, and while I do think that it makes sense to have the Nursing Services Director and the Finance Department do updates, if the Finance Committee would like quarterly updates, they can ask, the town manager, and to have the Finance Director and the Nursing Services Director come and do quarterly updates. Again, they're part of, like any other department, and do, they're part of the general updates that the Finance Department does to the Finance Committee. They're part of Budget Saturday and other things like that. But this committee very much did not want that to be part of their task, because they really don't have the ability to get that information.
So how are they going to gauge whether, because they're going to be working on marketing, how are they going to gauge whether they're effective?
They get reports,
Just numbers?
and so, again, in the final report, we talked a lot about how, in working with the Finance Department, the basic message is that when you increase your caseload, that's good for the budget, because while there are some services or procedures that might make more money than others, in general, just having an increase helps the bottom line. And so they look more at the number of cases that the nursing service has, as well as the number of visits and looking at increasing those. So that's really how they've been gauging that, and they do get, or the task force did get some financial information from the finance department, from the nursing services director, but they don't have kind of the ability to get that detail that they felt like they would need if that were to be part of their charge. So again, their focus is on increasing the number of people that use the service, and that has a positive financial impact on.
That's fine. I guess the financial department have to deal with it. It's just that I know that when the nursing service was still enterprise fund, and I think that it was probably before your time, there was an issue with the nursing, and this was when they were still migrating to Medicare reimbursement patients, because Medicare was still paying more. Maybe that's still true, but they're reducing their reimbursement rate, as the last I heard. But I think that the idea was, when it was still an enterprise fund, it was for every patient, you were losing money. And so the idea of getting more patients just meant that you were going to be losing the amount of money times the number of patients. And the question was, how is this ever going to sort of make ends meet? At that point, it was an enterprise fund that was important. Now it's an operating, in the operating budget. And I think that, yeah, because all of that stuff kind of gets covered. It's not as transparent as it once was, but I think that frankly, down the road, the nursing service does need to be aware of how it's doing financially, because it's for its own survival, because at some point, if not today, tomorrow, there might be some issue. People will be looking at, say, the amount that it's costing and want to know, well, how many people are you serving for that amount of money, especially if it starts to get very large, with all the changes that are occurring in insurance, the insurance industry, and even Affordable Care Act. Who knows? Everything may be getting more expensive, and there may be more people who are looking for services that are sort of subsidized. And my concern would be not to have that happen to the nursing service. So
yep, and they again, that's more the job, and I think what we talked a lot about in the task force is that financial stuff is more the job of the town staff, the nursing services director, the finance department, and town manager, and they are doing that. I mean, they're not just kind of letting things go, or not taking keeping track of the finances in the nursing department. So that does happen. It just was very much discussed about why it didn't make sense to have this be part of the actual committee's charge, at least at this time.
all right, that's fine. Just
Yeah, no, that's good.
Mr. Aronson, you have something to say?
Yes, Charlie Aronson, Hosmer Street. I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'm surprised. I didn't know that squirrels shed their skin.
When they're hot, they do.
Is it assumed that the current committee or the past committee are now all appointed to the new committee? Or are you going to go through a formal procedure to do that?
Yeah, they would go through the formal procedure, and so once this is approved, I would ask anyone that's interested in being on the new committee to apply to the VCC and go through that process.
Okay, and will the new charge be posted somewhere so that we can determine what it is? I mean, we're going to be recruiting more people because they are shy of 9 people now. So in order to recruit them, it would be very helpful to know what the charge for the committee is.
Yeah, it is in our packet, but we can determine,
But
also post
if
it.
it were posted somewhere, it would be helpful.
Okay, we'll do that. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Did you have? Brandy, go ahead.
I just, I don't need to know now, but it would be good to know what the difference between an advisory committee and a board is, because as you were talking about there being a department, the Acton Nursing Service, and there being this committee, I was thinking analogously of the Council on Aging Board and giving support to the Council on Aging and the staff there. And so I was thinking, what is really the difference? And then I have the Transportation Advisory Committee, and then we have the Rec Commission, and so I'm not sure exactly what they all are, and it would be good to learn sometime. Maybe I could just Google it.
Do you know, Mr. Manager?
But maybe, I don't know if we're
Sometimes it
sloppy.
might just be the name.
I don't know.
Let's have a committee to decide.
Has this been really thought out, calling it an advisory committee rather than a board?
Town of Amherst once had a committee to study the redundancy in committees. I think like advisory committees like this are really just advisory to the Board of Selectmen and/or town departments. They don't really have, like statutory responsibilities. Other committees like Recreation, in part is created by state law. They have certain function and they're responsible for recreation programs. Similarly, the Council on Aging, their function is to really develop programs and things like that for the seniors. So, some have more, I don't want to say adjudicatory, but they have more administrative responsibilities, where some just offer advice, like TAC would offer advice to the Board of Selectmen about transportation programs or things like that. Short, very short answer, but more complicated than that, obviously.
Is that all? All right. Is there a motion to approve the ANS Advisory Committee charge?
I move to approve the Acton Nursing Services Advisory Committee charge.
Second.
Katie moves and Franny seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Great, thank you. Okay, discussion of 4 Cherry Ridge Road. Mr. Manager, Darth Vader, you have some background about this.
I'm no longer Darth Vader.
Well, you look very much like our town manager, so
Don't let perceptions fool you. 4 Cherry Ridge Road is about a half-an-acre lot that the town acquired for back taxes back in 1978. It's pretty much been dormant for almost 40 years. Basically, it's become a wooded lot. When we were going through our inventory of some town-owned land a couple years ago, I brought this to the attention of Nancy Tavernier and the ACHC, thinking, well, maybe might be a lot they might be interested in doing something with. You have in your packet kind of the memo that she sent me back a couple years ago. We all got kind of sidetracked at that point with looking at things like the Morrison Farmhouse, and so we never really moved forward on 4 Cherry Ridge Road. I think Nancy wanted to see what the board's sentiment was on this property, and also was willing to do some outreach to the neighbors to get a sense of their reaction and how they would support affordable unit or something like that. So, once again, it's a property that's been there for quite some time, and it is a town property, but we could be able to address some affordable issues with it.
questions, comments? Franny?
I think it's a really good idea. Since we decided not to give the Morrison Farm house to Habitat for Humanity, I really like turning this into affordable housing, and I would just want us to fit as many small units onto it as we could, if it was possible somehow to fit in more than one. I couldn't tell from the...
Well, it's a half an acre.
It's
so
half acre, so yeah, probably one house.
But anyway,
It's a
that's,
housing lot.
because I know a lot of people are looking,
Could
especially
conceivably
smaller
be a
households
duplex,
for
I'm not sure.
tiny units. But I definitely am in favor of it, and I'm happy that we're doing that. I was laughing because the date is so long ago, so.
I don't see a problem with having the ACHC move forward. I think it'd be fine. So, if that's what they want to do, then by all means, go ahead.
Katie?
Sure, I'll just add, after I thought I was time traveling while reading this, because I was very confused about when everything was happening. Yeah, exactly. It was like before I was born. Well, it was taken well before I was born. But no, I think it's a great reuse, and I think it's a good opportunity to partner with Habitat. I know we have to put out an RFP, but presumably with them. And as Franny said, especially since we aren't doing the Morrison, it seems like great timing as well. So I think it's great that you kind of brought it back to life, and I hope we can make it happen.
Franny, go ahead.
I also just really like that it's walking distance from the village. I think it's a good
We'll
location.
display some squirrels, however, if we do.
You can be the ribbon cutter in your squirrel outfit, but no, I obviously agree with everybody else, and I think it's actually could be a much more attractive result, much nicer location for Habitat to build a house, because it is walking distance right in the neighborhood. And I assume I'm trying to figure out, I guess it has access onto Cherry Ridge Road. I know that it was attached originally to some other property, but it is not landlocked. I mean, Cherry Ridge Road, it's hard to see on this map, but I assume that you have a driveway going out to, they're kind of a weird, I guess the property it was attached to was on Juniper Ridge, and I forget which one it was, but anyhow, so the people lived in Juniper Ridge and they had this extra property in which they never paid taxes, so, but anyhow. Yep, Franny?
I think that, looking at the housing plan, which isn't on our agenda, but it was in our packet, the housing report from the Regional
RHSO.
Housing Office, I feel really bothered by the lack of affordable housing, how far we are from our 10%, and this is great, but this is one house, and I really want to just use this moment to remind us to try to do some really big things to bring up those numbers.
I think, this is an aside, it's not on the agenda, so I don't want to, but I think that Nancy and her committee have talked about doing a project that, where you would have multifamily housing, and it would be, because other towns have done that, they have projects that the town gets behind to try to get to the 10%, and it doesn't involve having a huge multi-story high-rise that has 300 units in it, so anyhow, all right, so do you just need a vote for us to authorize you to go forward, conferring with Nancy and Acton? Okay, so is there just, do you want to move? Go ahead.
Sure, I move that we authorize Steve to go ahead and make the arrangements to give the 4 Cherry Ridge Road to, are we giving it to Habitat for Humanity? Or
No,
we'd
it'd have to be
to hand the responsibility of this
just pursue,
property
yeah.
over to ACHC, to Acton Community Housing Corporation, to work out the details.
just move the process
I
forward.
want to move the process forward on 4 Cherry Ridge Road. I move.
Second.
And did you second, Katie?
Yes.
Okay, Franny moved, Katie second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining. Thank you. And then the last item on the agenda is the Minuteman. It's discussion. It's actually not the discussion of the Minuteman vote by the town of Belmont, but as most people know by now, on October 19th, Belmont had a special town meeting, and they voted to withdraw from the Minuteman Regional School District, and then their town clerk gave notice to the district, and the district in turn, through the school committee, notified all the 16 towns just very recently. At that point, every one of the member towns has 60 days to weigh in if they wish on Belmont's request to withdraw. If a town does nothing, does not call a special town meeting, the lack of action is deemed to be an approval. So the question here is, do we want to call a special town meeting to put this Belmont withdrawal on the agenda? And I would add that the way things stand right now, this is a little bit counterintuitive. Belmont, if it is not allowed to withdraw under the terms of the regional agreement, will stay in the region, but it is not obligated for the new building debt, because at its town meeting in the spring, in May, it voted down the proposed debt, and that's under the terms of the regional agreement. But if it is allowed to withdraw, then at some point, fiscal year 20, or could be fiscal year 21, whenever the school is ready and new school is ready and the debts comes due, and Belmont becomes an out-of-district school trying to send its kids to Minuteman, it will, under the terms, it's the state, it's the Commissioner of Education, and the regulations that they apply, that would require that Belmont pay not only the tuition, which is set by the Commission on Education for out-of-district students, but a school like Minuteman, which has a component of kids who are out-of-district, is authorized to add an extra charge to account for capital costs that the member towns bear. And so somebody else has done calculations of how this would play out for Belmont, say compared to what they're paying, would pay now if they stayed members and took on the building debt, as opposed to if they were out of district and had to send their kids in as out-of-district kids and pay the extra charge. Basically, it's not going to be that different. The financial benefit to them of getting out of the district is not going to be apparently what they were under the impression it would be, because Minuteman would be able to charge this capital fee. And so, anyhow, so I think it's ultimately the spreadsheets, which I think are in the packets from the assistant superintendent / financial manager for Minuteman, make it clear that if Belmont stays in the district, there's going to be a shifting of Belmont's share of the building debt to the remaining towns, and assuming that there are only 9 of us as opposed to new towns joining, then our proportional share would grow a little bit, whereas if Belmont is allowed to withdraw, basically our share of the debt is about the same as it was back when I did the presentation, I think in April or February, whenever I was doing presentations, and it's because the assumption is going to be that the now member towns that are withdrawing are going to come back in and they're going to have to kick in a share of the capital. So that's why the burden, if Belmont withdraws, looks as if it doesn't change that much from when Belmont is in. It's because Belmont is going to have to bear what it would have to pay, or close to what it would pay as a member if it goes out of district. So anyhow, so I know the superintendent is of the opinion that the member towns, the staying towns, should let Belmont withdraw. But it seems a little bit counterintuitive that you would do better by letting Belmont get out. There's also the fact that if Belmont stays in, an unhappy member and has a vote, which is worth a lot, and they have enough students so they could have more clout on the school committee, that could be a problem. They could become like Sudbury was. So anyhow.
Question? When you were saying what happens if they become an out-of-district school, is that the same thing that happens to schools that are already out-of-district? Or is that something like a punishment for becoming out-of-district right now? I mean, it's all the same?
Yeah.
Okay, and also...
But they're not going to be out-of-district for 3 years, whereas those 6 towns that had there was a special amendment of the original agreement to let them out faster. They'll be out next July.
Okay.
And then the assumption is a number of them are going to try to send their kids as out-of-district. And they're going to have to deal with this extra capital charge because it's already in effect, so.
And what was the cost of the town meetings that Belmont caused us all to have, the total cost to? Well, we had to have a special town meeting, right?
But that wasn't for Belmont, it was for the other 6 towns that were.
I think you might mean the vote, the district-wide vote that we had.
Oh, there's a vote, yeah, so what was the cost of the vote?
Minuteman paid for.
Minuteman paid for that. That's
They did?
kind of why we only had 1 polling place.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't remember
Okay.
how much that was. Yeah.
I guess I was just sort of annoyed at Belmont.
And then there was a separate campaign, which, I think different towns and volunteers in different towns took up the cost of that,
Now,
so.
we just received the formal notification of the Belmont vote today, so if we were going to do something, it's like 60 days from today.
Like just before Christmas.
Right.
Or maybe, wait a minute, we're end of October, yeah. It will end after Christmas. Or, well, we'd have to do it before Christmas, forget it. Maybe on Christmas Day.
So I'd like to just take your advice and not,
So I think we should probably have a formal motion, just basically not to call a special town meeting for this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, actually, if you look at what the assistant superintendent sent us, it actually looks like it'll cost us about $200 more if Belmont stays than if they leave. I think just because of how the formula works for everybody. Some towns, it would be a lot more expensive for them if Belmont stayed than if they left, but for us, it's kind of a wash either way, so I'm not worried about the finances of it. Generally, I personally think we should let them out for the reasons that you said, and especially because they end up staying a very disgruntled member with, a pretty big vote, and I don't think it's worth forcing it. I in some ways like the town to weigh in, but I don't think it's enough of a reason to call another special town meeting. And so I'd support just not having a special town meeting unless we hear a big blowback from the public wanting to talk about this issue.
Shing-Sung, any comments?
No, I agree that we should just let Belmont out, and it's not enough of a reason to call a special town meeting at this point.
So is there somebody going to make a motion?
I move that we do not call a special town meeting to vote on Belmont's withdrawal from the Minuteman Vocational Technical School District.
Second?
Katie moves, Shing-Sung second. Any further discussion? Any comments from the audience? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, abstaining. Thank you. That's it, I think.
Okay,
Right?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Katie moves, Franny seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstaining. Thank you.